everyone. I am Audrey Acton, and I am a biz coach for women entrepreneurs who are struggling and completely disconnected from their current businesses and are looking to fan the flames of their passion back up to where they were when they first started and dive into a business that fits them, the life that they want to lead, and the business that they want to run. We are going to be stepping into feminism today. At this point, I think there's a few things that need to be said. So, we're going to start with a little bit of history. One of the things I find amazing is feminism has, in all actuality, been around since 1848. We've had 175 years to work on this, and it still is not serving us in the way that it was meant to be when it first started. So in 1848, when it first got going, those first women were amazing. The bravery that they came to the forefront with to stand up and say, we deserve property rights, we deserve to make our own choices, and we deserve to vote. Those were huge things at that time. I mean, women were seen as second class citizens. And unfortunately, there's plenty of countries in the world that still look at them that way. Afghanistan has gone back to the point where girls are not even allowed to go to school anymore. That is crazy to me that women still don't have rights worldwide, and it's heartbreaking. Let's talk about what we did gain in that first wave of feminism that started in 1848 and ended in 1920. What that did is that got us legal rights. We could own property, we could go to school, we could vote, all of those things. One of the first unintended consequences, in my opinion, was that it set men and women against each other. At this point, I would say I'm not sure that they could have done it any different at that moment, because the bottom line is there was no persuading a lot of men, so to speak. Men were locked in their legacy model of everything as far as religion, politics, schooling, everything was in that legacy model, and men were seen as smarter, better, all of the things. The unintended consequence is that it battled us against men, is that women fought for their own rights and men fought to keep those rights from them. And that made us enemies. We also encountered that sort of good wife mentality that women now had this option. And there were plenty of women that didn't even care, because that's the way everything is. When there is a societal change happening, I mean, I think as far as like the American Revolution, I believe that only, I don't even think it was 10% of the colonies at that point actually agreed or were involved in wanting to separate from Britain and become our own country. Literally 90% of the country just didn't care. And so we have to look at that sort of mentality, that those waves of change that come, generally speaking, are only a very small percentage of the population. So you got to figure there was a lot of women that just didn't care at that point. I'm absolutely positive of it. But what it did is it still brought to the forefront that now you can do this. What are you going to do? There was this judgment already beginning at that moment of inviting other women who had not been involved in the movement to step into the movement, whether they wanted to or not. Some women wanted to stay where they were. They wanted to be a good wife and they wanted to raise kids and things like that. The other women were like, no, you can own property, you can get a job, you can do whatever you want. And so there was this dichotomy that happened as well. So in a way, it actually pitted women against women. So there was a lot of separation, I would say. That's probably the best way of putting it, in my opinion. Women weren't really in the workforce, but there were still women who had to work outside the home, and they had to get the most menial and awful jobs in the world. There was no education for a woman to be able to go out and make enough money to support a family. And that was a problem. And it's one of those things where you absolutely see the necessity for the change and then the unintended consequence that went with that change, which was really unfortunate. This is one of those things where it took so long that the catch up with the way the majority of women might have looked at everything compared to the small minority of women who were on the forefront and leading edge of this change, trying to get everybody involved in this was probably very cumbersome and difficult and challenging to say the least. I mean, who wants to go out there and fight? It's a difficult decision to make. And really, the second wave didn't start until the 1960s. So we're still talking now 40 years. And one of the things that changed everything really was World War II, because all the men went off to fight the war and all the women had to go and build everything. They're the ones that were in the factories. I don't think that there was an industry that wasn't heavily employing women to bring about the success of World War II. And then they were told to just go back home. And they had felt empowered at that moment. All of these women who were out in the workforce and realized that they could raise kids, that they were helping their country, that they were supporting their spouse who was over fighting the war. They had this newfound sense of, this feels good. I like this. And it shifted things. And then they were told to go back home. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your service to your country. Now go back home and raise those kids again. That was tough. I've read numerous stories about women who had an enormously difficult time stepping back into that mentality after living in their own power. And it was really the first time that women, the large scale women, saw what the possibilities could be. And then they were told to go home. Then what do we do? And that is essentially what led to the second wave of feminism. That initial wave, it set the stage for the second wave of feminism. And it came back to the reinforcement after the war of making men the enemy. And that was really unfortunate because men came back and wanted to pick up right where they were into the provider role and do what they had done before they had gone off to war. The men were changed from war, and then the women were changed from it as well. So we step into the second wave, which was from the 1960s to the 80s. This is something that I can personally speak of. I remember these moments to a certain extent. And also having family members who definitely participated in the 60s flower child movement and things like that. And then, of course, we had the sexual revolution that went along with that because there's the pill and women can have sex as much as men and not have to worry about it. It became this sort of dismantling of the family structure. It left a lot of single moms, single dads, and broken families, which was very unfortunate. I think the biggest unintended consequence was that we were told that we could be men, essentially. We were told that we could do anything that men could do. I remember a commercial for a perfume of all things, Anjali. Isn't that crazy that I even remember that? But there was a song that went with it, which I am not going to sing for you. It essentially said she can bring home the bacon, fry it up in the pan, and then take care of everything at home and be sexy and wonderful for her man. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world. And yet I remember that so vividly, the green bottle and everything. It's literally, I can see the picture in my head of her cooking in her business suit, in her suit from having gone to the office during the day, and then all sexy and everything at the end of the night. And so this thing created this expectation that we could be everything to everyone, including ourselves. Although I think that ourselves were left out of that mix. We were just told we could be men, we could have that all. And unfortunately, that is not true by any means. Because what happened then is by taking on the mantle of that masculine identity, it also put us in the driver's seat at home. One of the things that happens is, and this goes back to that legacy business model, where emotions and feelings are not allowed. They are actually detrimental. If you have a cry at work, you are a weak woman. So women had to suppress their emotions. They had to become more aggressive. They had to become more competitive. And they had to acquire masculine identities at work. And then that shut down the feminine inside of them. And the problem is, once you shut something down inside of you, once you suppress part of who you are in one area, you can't just turn it back on when you get back home. So women came home with this aggressive competitiveness and this lack of true identity back with being a woman, of being feminine, of having your own power and strength. It really affected relationships at that point because you had to be masculine to get ahead in the world because that legacy business model said you had to. You have to be like a man. It was the only way you were going to climb the corporate ladder. Not just to be intelligent, but you had to be strong and powerful and aggressive, and you had to look the part. You had to look powerful. Just nonsensical crap. You had to wear a business suit, but if you didn't look good in it, it didn't do you any good. I mean, there were so many contradictory things that went with this. And to my way of looking at it, I see that it ruined marriage after marriage after marriage because men weren't allowed to be men because women were competing with them for the man's job in the relationship. Who wants to live in a marriage where you're fighting for supremacy? I mean, women don't want to live like that. Men don't want to live like that. Home is supposed to be a sanctuary. Home is supposed to be where you are yourself. And women were lost because they had to become men. We all stepped into it. I know I did. I know I absolutely emasculated my first husband by being more masculine than him in certain ways. And that was wretched of me. Now, did I know any better? Of course not. None of us knows any better. We don't know at all the consequences of those things at the time. We didn't have the information. We were being told constantly in the media and by anybody out there. I mean, my gosh, I'm telling you about this stupid perfume commercial where they're telling us that you are everything. And it was horrifically overwhelming. The strain on women to be everything to everyone. It left ourselves in the dust. We were at the end of the list of have tos. And I think that in a way, that was a defining moment of the have to. And I think that this was a time in those 60s to the 80s where we were seeing women step into that role of have to. I have to do everything. And the pressure to have to do everything, to be everything to everyone was crushing. And to a certain extent, we're still in that. I mean, I know I took over the role of dad. I had taken over so much of the male role. I did everything and I was exhausted and I hated him for not helping me. And yet I was the one who would say, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. So I was constantly saying yes to everything, for every reason in the world. I did it to myself, again, because I didn't know any better. It created such a strain in relationships, and not just the relationship in the male female dynamic, but in the female female dynamic. Because, of course, women are the worst to each other. Yeah, I mean, men are nice to us, comparatively speaking. Women are horrible to each other. And if you weren't on top of and doing everything, well, what are you doing? Oh, what are you doing with your day? But strained relationships not just with the men, but with the women and then with yourself. So the relationship aspect in those 60s and 80s, second wave feminism were just crushing. It was almost like the pendulum had swung so far the other direction. We already had this other direction with the pendulum where things were strained because women weren't allowed to make their own choices. And then we went over here and started taking every single choice. There was something missing and there was something wrong in both of those things. You would hope that we would step into the pendulum swinging back to a more sort of neutral place, but unfortunately, that's not what happened. To wrap up that second wave feminism, it created a battleground at home and in business. And there was never a moment to relax, to be happy, to enjoy, to be a woman because we had to be men. And that was tough. And in business, part of the problem was that because women were pretending to be men, it was really, and it still is, very inauthentic of us. We are not meant to take on that masculine role, those masculine traits. It's the way our brains work, it's the way our evolutionary biology, our evolutionary psychology, all of it is in the mix. And we lost our authenticity in that. And because we weren't truly being who we could possibly be, no one respected us. No one saw us as viable. I got a job at managing at a restaurant, and I was the only woman in the management team at, and this was multiple restaurants. It was a full corporate structure, and I was the only woman manager that they had ever hired. I was essentially told to not be soft. I'm paraphrasing, of course. I was told to be meaner, to be harsher, to stand up more and let them know who was in charge. And to them, the only way to let them know was to be aggressive and to be competitive. And there's other ways to do it. Obviously, I didn't last very long at that job. As much as I tried, I was not cut out for that corporate environment. It was a really challenging time because I thought I was already being strong. I thought I already had the traits that I needed because I'd been managing for years at that point. I knew how to run a restaurant. And when I got there, I wasn't doing it right. I wasn't being aggressive enough. And I didn't know how to be more aggressive. I didn't know what that meant. And and that is one of the reasons why I left. And plus the fact that I had to suppress more of the soft, squishy part of me, that softer side of me that was saying, I don't want to treat people like this. That managing people is not a matter of keeping them under your thumb. It's a matter of creating respect that goes both ways, that I understand your position, now understand mine. And there were so many ways to do it, but I was always doing it wrong. There was never a moment when I did it right as far as they were concerned. And it was tough. And so here we are in this position of still trying to step into that strength and power of that masculine and it not fitting and getting no respect. And the unintended consequences from this entire thing have just been devastating to women and to men. We're going to step into third wave feminism now. We're talking 90s into the aughts. This is when things became kind of weird. Feminism started focusing on sort of marginalized group. It started engendering race and sexual orientation and things like that. If anything, my belief on this is that it lost its power to shape any kind of feminism language because they had split off into so many different ways that there was no sort of cohesiveness to the message anymore. When you start a movement, you want to kind of stick with the actual movement, right? And instead, you got this multi directional mentality over here and over there. And not that finding equality for everybody wasn't important. I absolutely agree. Feminism was about women. And all of a sudden, we were all about everybody else. To a certain extent, women lost a voice for themselves when feminism split off and broke up into this multi-directional way of looking at their activism, if you will. What happened is because you're looking at all of these individual pieces with feminism, it broke us apart from simply being women. It broke us into pieces so that you're a black woman or a brown woman or a white woman or an Asian woman or a gay woman or a bisexual woman or whatever it was. It didn't matter. It broke us into pieces. We are already having a problem with women already judging each other. And now we have all of this split. And then there's the hierarchy. Who was more important? Were black women more important than white women? Well, obviously, yes, they are. And then, well, are gay women more important than Asian women? Well, obviously they are. I mean, I don't know who made the rules. What I don't even know what the rules were at that point. I still don't at this point. What are the rules? Who determines this hierarchy? And the problem is now that's all legacy again. We're back into that legacy hierarchical way of looking at things. That one woman is more important than another woman because of the color of her skin or because of her sexual views. And that seemed horribly unfair. I know I didn't understand in any way what was happening in the feminism world. The message was that if you're not high up on that scale, whatever that scale is, you're not as important anymore. And so it fractured the relationship among women, which, wait a second, wait a second. Aren't we supposed to be supporting each other? Aren't we supposed to be collaborating, communicating, making a community? And instead, we created this fractured viewpoint of each individual woman being so different that there was this hierarchy shifting all the time of adding this and adding that or taking away this and taking away that. Well, you had an easy life. Well, you had a hard life. That makes you better. And that was so frustrating. And as a white woman, I can say, yeah, again, I have to own that I had privilege. I had privilege growing up. I had privilege as a white woman. And if I don't own that, that makes me, I don't even know what it makes me anymore. The feeling in this way of looking at feminism is the confusion that goes with this. I didn't know where I fit in anymore in feminism. If anything, I just became so confused by what we were doing. What direction are we taking here? I don't understand what is going on. To me, that unintended consequence from this is that it isolated us from each other. It broke us apart as women, even more than it had already. That we became separate groups instead of a group. We were no longer women. We were black women. We were white women. We were gay women. We were a name. We were a title. We were no longer ourselves. And that, I think, was crushing because here we are supposed to be doing it all again, still, but now you're going to do it alone. And that was disturbing, to say the least. I know for me, I felt really left out in the entire messaging of feminism during that time. And that was really when I started looking for something different. I already felt alone. Now I felt bad about myself and I felt alone. And there was no one I could go to and say, where's my girl power kind of a thing. That was my feeling at the time. What happened too, where business is concerned, is that message of you can do anything was still there. You can do anything a man can do, which is patently false. We cannot. I am never going to be as strong as a man. That's all there is to it. And who builds our buildings? Who takes care of the sewer systems? It's 90+% men. They're the ones out there doing the hard work because women have a hard time doing it. Why are there women who do nursing? Because it touches into that nurturing that we naturally have inside of us. And you want to tell me that doesn't take some power and strength to do? Holy smoke, it does. And not just the physicality of it, but everything that goes along with that. To be that nurturer, to give so much of yourself into your job is draining at best and debilitating at worst. But you want to talk about tapping into your feminine power and really getting dissed for it. Like, there was no respect for nurses, which is insane to me. These women, and now there are a lot of men nurses. I'm going on this premise right now that women are powerful in that position and they got no respect for it. They didn't get paid properly for it. The hours were absolutely off the charts. There was still a problem with being our own empowered selves, our own powerful female selves. And sadly, feminism actually made it worse, in my opinion, because by fracturing us into pockets of physical descriptive, and it broke us apart. It eliminated our ability to come together. To me, it broke a trust between women because some women were more important than other women. And not only does it break trust between us, it breaks trust like as a whole, as a group. I know for me, that was the moment I truly said, I'm not a feminist anymore. I cannot continue on with this. It really broke that whole idea of female freedom to me. And I went looking for new things, which is, of course, the whole journey of understanding the female brain, the male brain, the evolutionary biology, the evolutionary psychology, all of that that I have studied at this point. So for me, I mean, it was a great moment as far as, waking myself up. It was fantastic. Now I'm going to step into the 2010s to now. So we're in fourth wave feminism, and we stepped into that whole social justice, the Me Too, and all the digital sort of activism that has exploded since then. Because before we used to have marches, now anybody can get involved online, and which is kind of a cool thing because you can make your voice heard. And yet, we still had some unintended consequences from this as well. I think one of the things that has been the worst in the entire last 15 years has been the Me Too movement. I'm not going to say that every woman has been sexually harassed, but I think it probably comes pretty damn close. It's happened to me multiple times over the years. Was there ever a job involved? Yes, there was. Were there other random moments? Yes, there were. How can I put this? The sexual harassment was overlooked up until then. During all this time, women had power, and then to realize that they didn't, that they had been being harassed and abused all this time under the table, so to speak. That I'm lifting you up on one hand, and then on the other hand, I'm going to take from you what I want. And that was, again, another moment of broken trust because these were powerful men out there who completely abused their power over women. And if you think it's still not happening today, I got news for you. It is. I think there's a lot of skeletons in a lot of people's closets. And the only way to regain trust is to open the door, open the windows, air it all out, and get it all out in the open. That's the only way to restore trust. And it's the only way to keep men from doing it again, in my opinion. At this point, we're still in the hiding phase, which is very, very challenging. Another thing that's happening too in this last fourth wave that we're looking at is the activism that started in the third wave. And the thing that I consider the fracturing between women is that there's this constant need to promote, to be activists, to come out and say, I believe this, I believe that. And that it's sort of this activism burnout to a certain extent, that you're supposed to get on TikTok and tell everybody how awful they're being to someone else. And that's terrible. And again, it's this sort of continuing fracture that sort of keeps breaking and cracking and creating more and more fractures so that we don't see each other as human beings anymore. We see each other as an enemy, as another tribe, as someone who needs to be put down, even if it's just metaphorically, like sticking the thumb on them and making sure they don't talk anymore. It's a problem, to say the least. What started out as a noble cause has now become a cause of cancellation, if you will. Cancel culture is a real thing. Whether I agree with what you've said or not, I don't believe that you should lose your job. I believe in free speech. I believe in being able to say whatever you want to say. And it's up to you. If you want to ride that line, if you want to think that you can say whatever you want. I could be canceled for all the things that I'm saying right now, for instance. Not that I care, but it's beside the point. Either way, I think that this is exhausting for everyone. That because we have become so fractured, because the fractures keep fracturing and more and more, that it's hard to know where to be. Where is the simple belief in supporting each other? It's gone. You can't simply support everyone. You have to support XYZ and every other letter in the alphabet. And that's probably not enough either. And I'm not talking about anything specific. I'm just saying there are so many things to support out there that you can't possibly support every single one. And if you don't support every single one, then you've left something out. You're in big trouble. Again, how does that bring us together? How does that in any way, shape, or form engender feminism and inclusion? It doesn't. It fractures more. Back to the Me Too. Women have lost their trust in men because up until this point, we sort of saw men as they were the ones that were kind of crappy, and then there was the rest of them. And now there's such a lack of trust of men from women, especially younger women. That whole thing that's been going on online now for months about, would you rather be lost in the woods with a man or a bear? And these women under 30 invariably say a bear because men are more dangerous, which is batshit crazy. You think that you have a better chance with an animal with a flick of his finger with that claw can kill you is insane. How can you possibly equate that man with that bear? To me, it is insane. But it's sort of an encapsulation, a really great example of that break in trust between men and women. There isn't any. In the younger generation who've been brought up with feminism from the third and fourth wave, they see men as dangerous. And that's really unfortunate because most men would do anything to protect women, which is insane that women don't know that. But men don't say it because men don't talk as much as women. And women wouldn't believe them now, anyways. That's the problem, is that they would never believe that they would be safer with a man than with a bear. It's mind blowing to me. As far as business goes, when we've stepped into a much more expanded era of entrepreneurship where women are concerned. There are women CEOs everywhere. The glass ceiling has been shattered in multiple ways, except for the presidency, which I'm not going to step into. So, what's happened where women in leadership positions is again, they've been able to sort of tap into their feminine a little bit more, but in order to really rise in the ranks, they've still had to be competitive and aggressive and believe in that hierarchy of the structure of the legacy model. And the more that this is happening, the more women have stepped into entrepreneurship, which is great because it allows women to be who they want to be. And they don't have to pretend to be aggressive and competitive and worry about that legacy model. Unfortunately, we don't really understand very well that we take all that information with us and we try and run our business with that same mentality. And it's kind of unfortunate. We try and put ourselves into it, but that's what the evolving model is. We're moving into a different way of doing things. The part that's happening now that has to do with the fracturing is we've lost this ability. I don't want to call it forgiveness because that isn't fair. We've lost a cohesiveness as a society to a certain extent, and it's really unfortunate to say the least. But women, most of all, have been fractured. I don't know what the answer is. I don't understand how to bring us back from that edge of absolute lack of trust in each other. We need to reform or take a completely different road, step back from the edge and move into a different way of seeing each other as women and create a different kind of trust, one that respects the choices that any woman makes. Because I think that that's one of those things that has held over from probably the mid 80s, where if you didn't want to be in business, if you didn't want to go and work, well, it didn't give you any credibility. If you wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, if you wanted to live the life of that stay-at-home mom, you were seen as less than. And again, it's another fracture. When we fractured ourselves away from respecting anyone's choices, anyone's way of wanting to live, it made any other choice of saying you're not doing it right okay. I remember doing a live a few years ago on International Women's Day and talking about how this is a UN sanctioned day, International Women's Day. And this day of celebration of women is supported by countries who don't give women anything. Women are second class citizens. They aren't allowed to own property. They can't make choices about who they're going to marry. They can be married off at a single digit age. And these countries are saying, yeah, we're for International Women's Day. And I think that's appalling that we as a nation, as a Western country, and there are multiple Western countries that are all about feminism, that we are celebrating ourselves while these women are not allowed anything. They don't have any rights at all. And you never hear feminism talk about that. Why is that? I don't understand that. We've made huge strides towards equality. Everything that we have accomplished in the last 175 years has been pretty impressive. It's also crushed us as women. It's also crushed men, but that's a whole other thing to talk about. Right now, I'm talking about what it's done to us. It's fractured us from each other as women. It has absolutely made it not okay. It's made it detrimental to not support people the right way. There has been so much hatred directed at other women by women in the last 20 years. It's just appalling to me. I mean, there's this part of me that wants to say, how dare you? But I'm not going to say that. But there's a part of me that thinks that. How dare you be so cruel to another woman because they want to live a different life than you? It's insane to me. It's mind-blowingly cruel. And until we come to a point where we see that as cruel, where we see that as detrimental, then there's no change. There's no stepping back from that brink. We have to come to a point of acceptance for everyone, whatever the choices they're making. I don't believe that we have a choice in this. We have to, or we're broken completely. We really need to step back from this brink of lack of trust among ourselves. And really, in my opinion, it has to start with women. We have to start giving men their dues. We have to allow men to be men and stop trying to be men ourselves. Step back from that. There are so many ways forward, and you can be as badass as you want, because I think that that's something we've been taught, that we need to be badass. Well, you can be badass all you want. It doesn't mean you have to be a man. You can be badass as a woman. We have power, we have strength, we have amazing gifts. Unfortunately, they have been completely ignored in at least the last 100 years. And that needs to change. So, what does this all mean where I'm talking about with business? Well, that corporate environment is something that I literally have no idea how to change that, because I'm not a corporate person. I've worked for corporations before and I've managed in that situation, but I don't have enough history or knowledge. Where entrepreneurship is concerned, I believe that if we can figure out a way forward, if we can connect together, if we can see each other as partners on this road to creating our own freedoms, our own life, our own happiness, and our own abundance, no matter what you look like and no matter what you believe, that's how we do it. It's one of the reasons why Ms. Mind to me is so important, is because there's women in the room that don't look like you. And isn't that fantastic? There's women in the room doing something that you've never even thought of before. And again, isn't that fantastic? Look at all you learn from associating with people who know something different than you. And guess what? You get to share you too. You get to share who you are. And that's why it's so important. I firmly believe that we are already unique. We don't need labels. We don't need specific categories. No one else is like you. No one else is like me. There may be a doppelganger out there. Actually, supposedly there's at least 6 doppelgangers out there that look just like me, but they're not me. No one's like me. No one's like you. We are all special. We are all unique. We are all meant to have something to share. And that doesn't make me better than you or you better than me or anybody. We are on a playing field where we're all unique and have separate and unique and special gifts to give. And that's the recognition that deserves to be seen, not putting each other in categories and saying, your category is better, your category is not. That's ridiculous. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that feminism has been on the front wave of, is separating us and not bringing us together. And that is truly unfortunate. It is time to change. Feminism is no longer respectful of women. Feminism, if anything, has tried to change women into men. How is that feminism? That's ridiculous. This is how I see it. In all actuality, the message was become men. The underlying message was become a man. And that's insane. We lost our ability to be okay, to be proud of, to embrace what it's like to be a woman, what our power is, what our strengths are, just the choices that we want to make. Because if you want to be a stay at home mom, absolutely more power to you. You want to go climb that corporate ladder? Ooh, awesome. Go do it. You want to be president? Absolutely. I'm down for it. Run as yourself. Be authentic. Do it the right way. Do it the way that showcases who you truly are. Engender the trust in yourself so that you can engender trust with other people who see you. That's it. It's as simple as that. And that's how we come back together. It's why I love Ms. Mind again, because we create trust and understanding that we're all on this same journey. We're all trying to be the best people that we possibly can. And isn't that ultimately what we want? I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be. I'm open for that. You know, I really am. Anybody got any comments? Think I'm wrong? Feel free, throw them in the comments. I am down to hear your opinion of everything that I have just brought out. Should be fun. Either way, to wrap this up, I think that the wave of the future comes from women entrepreneurs because we have much more ability to create businesses that reflect our own female power, our own feminine strengths, and our use specifically and purposefully of the way our brains work to create a business model and to create, if you will, true inclusiveness together to heal the fractures and make us all one tribe, if you will. I don't like that word either, but there it is. Instead of these fractured tribes of hierarchy of one better than the other, and that's insane to me. So it's up to us as the entrepreneurs that are forging our way into a new way of running business. It's how we break that legacy system. And someday someone will be able to break the corporate system. I don't think that's me, but maybe someone who hears my message will be able to break that. But for me, I think that my way of looking at this is that we're better together than we are fractured. And right now we're fractured and we need to find a way back together. And what's funny is I just had that picture of the Coca-Cola commercial. Oh my God, I'm crazy. That the stuff in my head where everybody's singing and holding hands across the world like to bring the world along in perfect harmony. Yeah, that's where they showed everybody holding hands across the whole US. That's okay, that I guess is probably the best way to wrap this up. Singing. And a Coca-Cola commercial. How did I started off with a commercial and now I'm ending with a commercial. Oh my God, the insanity of it. I'm so sorry. All right. That's going to be it for me. If you have any comments, if you have any thoughts, I am absolutely open to them. If you like what I'm talking about, please subscribe, share it with your BBFs. And until tomorrow, I think I'm going to take a little easier subject tomorrow. And I will catch you then. See ya.